You've tuned in to the Beyond Hope podcast, your access to success strategies and more to help you survive and thrive through your loved one's addiction challenges while you move onward and upward with your life. Now, here's your host, Shar Jones.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond Hope Radio. If this is your first time joining me, thank you so much for being here. And to those of you who keep coming back, I'm so grateful for you. Today I am sharing with you an interview that is really special to me. Aundre Washington, I invited him on the show in April of this year. This was post-COVID and before the murder of George Floyd. Aundre and I met over interesting circumstances late last year, and we have continued to be friends, and he is someone that I care about. He and his family are important to me. And Aundre reached out to me after seeing a news post that had mentioned my name, and he reached out to me, and we just developed a friendship. I had driven past a Starbucks sign that had had the words whites only spray painted on it. This was on Halloween, no less. And I flipped a Huey, pulled over, stopped the car, left the car running, got out, did a video, posted it, tagged Starbucks, and it got some attention. And Aundre reached out to me. And the fact that he reached out to me and knew that I was speaking from my heart about this topic, really meant a lot to me. And I'm grateful for him. Aundre, thank you so much for coming into my life. And I hope that we continue to be friends. I believe that we will be. So I invited Aundre to come onto the show to share our personal experience about darkness and hope and what it means to not give up. And I know that all of us can think back to a time, maybe you're there now, where you just feel like you want to give up, or like things are falling down around you. And I hope that Aundre's voice lifts you up today. And I'm going to include a link to his website below. I hope that you check it out. And I'm just sending you so much love, and I hope you enjoy.
I'll just kind of share a little bit about myself and kind of go into brief details about how you and I met. Very special story in my opinion.
I think so too.
Even though the circumstances probably weren't the best, but I think it all worked out for a reason. Yeah. And so when I look back in retrospect, it's like, man, I'm glad it happened, because I wouldn't have made that connection with you. So it's really been great. But no, just a little bit about me. Obviously my name is Aundre Washington. I'm originally a Texas native. Very, very loud and very proud about my origin from Texas, as you can see. But I'm living here in the Seattle, Tacoma area with my wife and my 2 children. We have a baby on the way.
Congratulations!
Yeah, a little girl. She'll be here in July, so we're excited about that. We're quarantined just like everybody else during this coronavirus crisis. Mm-hmm. But life is still good. I'm a young man who's passionate about his faith, passionate about his family, passionate about seeing other people make progress in life. Mm-hmm. Because I can name a few people who reached out to me throughout my lifetime and has really helped me make progress in life. So I feel that my life's calling, passion, and purpose, why I was created, was to reach people. Whatever that may look like, reach them right where they are, reach who they are without asking them to change who they are, to inspire them, so they can have a transformative experience. And that could be a change of thought. That can be going, hey, I never looked at it that way. That can be a change of behavior. So if I can have a simple conversation with a person, and inspire them in such a way to where they may want to do something different, or do something better. And not that they were doing anything bad, because people say things to me all the time and I kind of go, oh man, I didn't even look at it that way. And it changes the trajectory of where I'm headed. Simple conversation. So that's what I want to do and what I feel like I'm called to do. How me and my good friend Cher met. It was it October? I think it was October of last year. And I was just kind of scrolling up and down on Facebook, and I saw a sign, a Starbucks sign rather, mm-hmm. and someone spray painted whites only on the sign. Mm-hmm. And that caught my attention. Be it as that I am an African-American man in the Pacific Northwest, where probably, if I remember the correct number, probably 80 to 85% of the state is white. So out of 7.5 million people, you're looking at a little over 200,000 who are African-American. But then I bring a different dynamic because here I am, a Southern man mm-hmm. in the Pacific Northwest, which you're talking two completely different cultures on two ends of the spectrum. So it was a big culture shock when I got here. So that really struck home for me when I was like, okay, whites only, which I'm sure Cher and I will go into this some other time. But historically, that struck a chord with me, just thinking about what that means for our society from a historical perspective. But anyway, I was curious to know who took that picture. So as I looked up the news reports and everything, Cher's name popped up, and I was like, man, I got to reach out to this lady, because what she did is she addressed an issue that really she could have easily, as a Caucasian woman, walked away and said, that has nothing to do with me. So, Cher, you stopped and you went to that Starbucks, and as I like to tell people when I tell this story, use some pretty encouraging but yet colorful language to get them to wake the heck up and realize, hey, this is not okay. Somebody needs to do something about it, regardless of who sprayed that on the sign. Yeah. Regardless of what the color of their skin was, this is not okay. And with that being said, I sent Cher a message, and I didn't really think she was going to see it or respond, because I'm quite sure you was getting a lot of messages during that time. And lo and behold, you responded. And I just expressed my gratitude to you as an African-American man, and the fact that you stopped and you addressed an issue. Me personally, I wish more Caucasian, more white people would do that. So you spoke up for your community. And in my mind, as a Black man, I am a part of your community. And I know that that's not the case for a lot of white people. So I'm still eternally grateful for you for doing that. And so with that being said, I decided to do some time after that whole event really kind of inspired me to put together a conference at the church that I attend, the church in which I am also on staff there as one of the leaders there. And that church, that conference, was all about racial reconciliation and social justice. And Cher came and we sat on the stage together and we talked about that issue. And it was just a blessing. It was emotional. It was inspiring. It was encouraging. It was transformative. It was a lot of different things. And so we have continued, and that was back in February. We have continued to at least think about it together and talk about it, which led to us doing this. So I know I kind of said a lot real fast, but it's just kind of some of my background. But when you reached out to me and you talked about what you wanted to do, for one, I want to say thank you for giving me a platform to share my story, because I feel like sharing my story is another way for me to live out my purpose, to reach people. And you talked about a story of brokenness. And the truth of the matter is, all of us, we all have been there. Some of us are there now. I can only imagine, now that I think about it, with everybody being quarantined and everything that's happening right now, I can only imagine some of the brokenness that people are experiencing, like right now in this moment. I can only imagine that being stuck in the house and kind of being forced into a situation that has caused a lot of disruption and a lot of discomfort, how that has probably revealed some brokenness in people, some brokenness that they probably didn't even know was there. Because I know even myself, I have been doing a lot of reflecting here lately, because we don't have nothing but time to do it, right? But there is a time in particular And I share this story a lot. Back in the year of 2016, it was January 20 something of 2016, and I got laid off. Now, if you're listening to this, you may go, dude, people get laid off all the time, but just bear with me. At the time, it was myself, my wife, and we had 2 children. And keep in mind, my boys right now they're 8 and 6. So back then they were even younger. You know what I mean? So I got laid off, which for some reason I kind of felt it coming. And I was laid off for an entire 6 months. You know, just seems like there was no hope for me getting a job, and I was trying my best. But, and what's crazy is I've been laid off before prior to that. But for some reason, this layoff hit me real hard for some reason. I kind of felt like, oh man, I've been laid off before. Like this piece of cake, I can get through this. No, that was not the case. I think I really, if I'm being completely honest, I think I battled with some level of depression and anxiety. And I don't use those terms loosely because I remember walking around the house just feeling hopeless. Like I did not feel myself. I felt less than, I didn't feel like I was a man. I didn't feel like I was able to take care of my wife. I didn't feel like I was taking care of my children. Like very prideful. Like I didn't even want to ask my wife for $10. You see what I'm saying? Because I felt like that is not the natural order of things. You know what I mean? I remember walking around the house like with this intense pressure in my head. And I'm not one to have headaches. So that's when I kind of learned that with depression and anxiety, how that can have an impact on your body physically, you know, and psychologically. You know, I'm like, man, like, am I having an anxiety attack? Like I would ask myself these questions, and thank God that wasn't the case. But I do think I wrestled with depression and anxiety. Like even with my wife and my kids, I couldn't find a reason to even be happy. Mm-hmm. I would be sitting on the floor playing with my kids, but deep down inside, I was not happy. Like I was not okay with this scenario. Mm-hmm. And going on job interviews and knowing that I was capable and able and qualified, and just hearing people say no, like back to back to back to back to back. Then I think that turns into bitterness, which breaks you even more, because basically that's just anger turned inside out, and I'm going, so now I'm not good enough. Mm-hmm. Then now I'm wrestling with, you got the anxiety, the depression. Now here comes insecurity, because I'm not good enough. Everybody's saying no. What am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? Oh, I should have did this. Oh, I should have did that. Oh, I should have thought about this. Oh, I should have said that. So now you have all these different unhealthy emotions that I am feeling each and every day. What made it even harder is because my vocation is ministry. So while I am broken and depressed and anxious and insecure, I still had to encourage and inspire other people. I still had to go and teach Bible study at the church and tell people that God is good and everything's going to be okay, only to go back home and wrestle with my own faith and not even believe in the things that I was telling other people. You know what I mean? And then here comes this feeling of, oh, now I'm a hypocrite. Mm-hmm. All these different things going on at the same time. And so then while I'm unemployed, my wife loses her grandmother. Suddenly, I remember when it happened. We were laying in the bed. She was on the phone with her grandmother, laughing and joking. The next day, I get a phone call. My wife is screaming. Oh. She's gone, she's gone, she's gone. So she had no time to brace herself. So, you know, it's different when someone is sick, they're in the hospital, and you kind of go, okay, slowly but surely they're kind of drifting away. So you kind of brace yourself, but not when you're on the phone, normal day, laughing and joking. Okay, I love you. Talk to you later. Next day, she's gone. So I had to watch my wife wrestle with her own brokenness. But it was hard for me, I think, to really, at least I feel, she may think different. I feel like I didn't do a good job, or I wasn't strong enough to cater to her brokenness, because I was just as broken. So now you got we're already broken as individuals living in a fallen world, but now you guys life circumstances that has broken us even more. And I'm like, now here I am as the man, I got to carry this load for her, and I can't because I'm hurting too. And I'm hurting because she's hurting. And, you know, I was really close to my grandmother-in-law, you know what I mean? Like, so it was like, man, and I had to speak at the funeral. So I had to do the eulogy. So here I am, the preacher man standing on the podium, looking down at the casket. This is my wife's grandmother, a lady who I love dearly, looking over to my left at my wife. Oh. And now there's the tension of two callings, right? I'm called to serve people by way of sharing God's love and God's word, by way of being a clergyman, if you will. But yet I'm called to be a husband. So what's more important right now? So I asked my wife when my mother-in-law came to me and said, we want you to do the eulogy. I said, well, baby, is that okay with you? Because I felt this dying and urging need to be by her side during that moment, but I could not. But keep in mind, here I am wanting to serve the family and to encourage people and to lay my grandmother-in-law to rest. But I still had to go back home. No job. Money's getting low. So, you know, now we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're exhausting our savings account, and my wife's carrying a load. So I was just like, okay, none of this is adding up. So then there were some other things going on that I can't go into details about, just certain family dynamics where I just saw certain people in my family just going through it, you know, just struggling with certain things, and life just hit them real hard. And, you know, sometimes when you're close to your family members, sometimes their issues can kind of flood into your house sometimes, if you know what I mean, without going into detail. So I have to kind of deal with some of that. So it's kind of like almost taking the burden of somebody else's brokenness, but then still trying to manage my own. How do you really manage and mitigate that without coming off as being careless or apathetic? But it is what it is. It happened. So after that, I remember finally getting a job, but it just didn't feel right. Like I basically, it wasn't the job that I wanted. And I had to take that job because unemployment only paid for 6 months.
Okay.
So I was at the 6-month mark. So it's like, it didn't pay much. And I remember still like kind of struggling financially, even with this job. I mean, don't get me, I'm thankful for it, but it wasn't the job that I want. And what made it even more frustrating is it was the organization that I wanted to work for. But I interviewed for a particular position that would have put me where I needed to be financially. But then the guy came back in his words and said I wasn't ready for that position, which I knew I was, and put me in a position that was way lower pay grade. So I was kind of like, what was the whole point? You know what I mean? Now I'm missing out on an opportunity based on the opinion of another person who knows nothing about me. Yet I'm in this place and I'm seeing people when I'm like, man, what they are doing, I know I can do. Probably was more experienced than they were, but for whatever reason, it happened. And I remember even on that job, getting a paycheck, great benefits and all that, but I just felt very unfulfilled. Now I started to wrestle with my faith and my purpose. Like, there are things that I would dream about, things that were so inspiring, and I start to lose like my vision, so to speak. Like the things that I was inspiring to do, the person who I was aspiring to become. Like before all this stuff happened, I had a very like clear vision of that. Like in X amount of years, I believe here's where I'm going to be. You know what I mean? Or here's where I would like to be. Here's the goal that I'm going to press towards. So I start losing sight of that, as if there's no way possible I can make that goal, or I can become this great person that I want to become. So I gave up on myself. I gave up, and all of my emotions, even some of my behaviors were predicated on my circumstances, meaning, I probably allowed myself to have more bad days than good days. And that's my fault, because I really could have had more good days. I recall just being snappy and just agitated with my kids and my wife, and it just altered me. I didn't want to preach anymore. I didn't want to share my faith anymore. I didn't want to encourage anybody anymore. And I remember I would be upset sometimes to see other people make it. And I'm like, man, like, why am I, having such a hard time? So it seems like I was broken, and then some healing possibly could have came, but instead I was broken and then broke some more. So I felt like there was no progress being made. So now we get deeper into the year, and I'm at work. My mom calls me screaming, and she goes, my oldest son, his name is Chancellor. She says, Chancellor's not responding. So as a parent, for those who have children, I blacked out at that point. All I heard was Chancellor's not responding. Well, in my mind, well, what does that mean? I dropped him off this morning. He was okay. What do you mean he's not responding? Look up. They're in an ambulance. They're headed to Children's Medical Center in Dallas, Texas at the time. Same year. Call my wife. I'm like, man, I don't want to call her and tell her child isn't responding. But I had to. She breaks down. She's crying. She's panicking. So come to find out he had a seizure, which was strange. Perfectly healthy kid, seizure. Long story short, he had up to 7 seizures, just random, just like back to back. And I remember that day, between like 2 days, we were back and forth in the emergency room because he would have the seizure. We would take him and say, hey, he's having a seizure. Doctors would say, no, he's not. We would leave, get home, he'll have a seizure, take him back. He's having a seizure. No, he's not. Explain it to us. That's not a seizure. That's not like I'm not exaggerating. One doctor in particular, like literally argued with us. I'm not exaggerating about our child, about what is a seizure and what's not. And then tried to leverage her education and say, well, I'm doing my residency and I have a such and such, so I know. So that was hard because as a person of faith who hasn't always been a person of faith, you kind of get those flashbacks sometimes like, oh my goodness, lady, if you had caught me a couple years ago, before I gave my life to you, like I would be saying some stuff to you that probably, or either doing something right now that'll land me in jail. And I'm just being real.
I hear you.
My wife, I was like, this lady is lucky. Like we are who we are right now, because this would have ended pretty bad. Because we're talking about, because for us, at least for us, because it was our child, it was a matter of life or death for us. Not that he was dying, but that's just the mode that you get in with your kids. You know what I mean? And so we were in the emergency room. He had a seizure. Now I didn't want to do it, but I pulled out my phone and recorded it. I already knew they were going to say it's not a seizure. And when I showed it to them, they all put their head down.
Wow.
They had to apologize.
Wow.
We could have been here, admitted into the hospital, probably could have some type of way mitigated whatever the issue was sooner if you all just had to believe us the first time. So it took all of that. You know what I mean? And so that right there was frustrating. And I remember kind of going like, God, like, why does it have to be so complicated? And why does it have to be so difficult? Like anybody else probably could have walked right in. You know what I mean? But why do we have to go through all of this? I mean, I just feel like we just couldn't get a break that year. Now this happened the week leading up to Christmas. So he had the seizures. Then I look up my youngest child, who was, that was 2016, like 3 at the time. he was struggling breathing. He really couldn't breathe well. So that was strange. So come to find out, his lungs were inflamed. So he wasn't receiving a lot of air. And you could see him like struggling to breathe. And it was worse than we thought it was. Like, we didn't give that one as much credit because it wasn't as visible as like the seizures, right? But this happened simultaneously. So we took him to the ER. Long story short, both of our children were admitted to the hospital at the same time.
No.
One on the 8th floor, one on the 11th floor. My wife had to stay with one. I had to stay with one. One having seizures.
Right.
Oh my gosh. It was a respiratory infection. So a virus came from somewhere. They both got it, the virus, but it affected them differently. Seizures, respiratory infection. So we stayed in the hospital for nearly a week. But the seizure thing really freaked me out because they did an x-ray on my son's brain. They had to, poking him with needles. Like, he was like 5 at the time. Like, we just watched him suffer and couldn't do anything about it. Hooking him up to a machine and looking at my youngest son, breathing tube in his nose. I mean, it was that was brutal think about it, a 3-year-old.
Breaks my heart.
3-year-old and a 5-year-old. Now I'm asking myself the question, God, why? I'm going to be honest with you. As a person of faith, as one who has really sold himself out to Jesus Christ, I was angry. I was done. I remember going down to the chapel in that hospital, screaming at the top of my lungs, crying, asking God why. I was angry. I said, now I kind of blame the misfortune of the year on God. I'm like, well, you messed up and jacked up my whole year. Now we get to the end of it when I was hoping to get some relief. Now you're trying to take my kids from me. You know what I mean? What is really going on? So now I'm thinking, okay, what did I do? That's the first thing we do. What did I do wrong? Yeah. What is this retribution about? What is this punishment? Is it this? Is it that? And obviously, looking back in retrospect, none of that was the case. But that's just how I felt in the moment. But yeah, I remember they took an x-ray of my son's brain, and this really flipped me out. I saw it was 4 white spots on his brain. So then I'm like, and clearly they had something to do with the seizures, but I'm like, I just stopped listening to the doctor. I ran out the room and I just bawled in the hallway. Cause I'm like, man, like, cause now you're thinking, is this going to affect him neurologically for the rest of his life? Like, are there lasting effects and all that? And he was a perfectly healthy kid and this came out of nowhere. So thankfully we ended up getting a really good doctor who really cared. And she was very helpful, got him on medication. My other son recovered. But then now it's like, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, like, we were preparing to spend Christmas in the hospital. Christmas Eve, everything checked out, ran some more tests on both kids. We got discharged. So we were able to spend Christmas at home. And it's some more things that happened that year. But just emotionally, spiritually, mentally, it was very taxing. It was frustrating. I spent most of that year angry. And even now, I mean, I can't think of one thing that year that made me happy other than my kids getting discharged from the hospital. Now, as I look back in retrospect, clearly I have a completely different perspective about that year. Now I can say that I'm thankful for that year because that year made me and my wife the people that we are today, or it contributed to it. Just from the regard of being stronger people, just from the regard of being able to tell their story to someone else who may be broken, to say, hey, we made it through it. To be able to say, I struggled with my faith. Not that I was going to walk away from it, but I asked a lot of questions, you know what I mean, that I never asked before, and found myself angry with the God who I truly believe saved my life and most definitely carried us through that year. And I'm not, being a person of faith, I'm not ashamed to say that I was angry with my God. It is what it is. And I don't even think he's holding it against me. I really think that he understands. You know what I mean? And that's why I love him. But I was mad at how I got out of it. You know what? I think it took a while. I think about things that I've gone through prior to 2016. And it's like, I feel like I had more wherewithal to kind of pull myself out of it. But 2016, I feel like I couldn't. I feel like I had nothing. I had no strength. I had nothing to pull me out of that. I think I just had to go through it.
Yeah.
It was no getting out of it. It was no figuring out a clever way to change the situation. I couldn't change it. I came out of it, but I couldn't pull myself out of it. I just had to weather the storm, so to speak. Yeah. And I think that's what made me even more frustrated about the year. No, like, light at the end of the tunnel, and midway through the year, it's like, oh man, like, made it through that. You know what I mean? And I recall just praying and felt like no prayers were being answered. And, at the end of the year, after it all happened, and I look back, I'm like, man, like, I was a stronger person. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I've gone through things after that. And to be honest, I've handled them a lot better. And I think it's because of 2016. As much of a thorn in my flesh as it was, me going through that, it toughened me up. That's the best way I can explain it. It toughened me up. And I can look back and go, man, like, if it hadn't been for that year, I probably wouldn't have been able to endure some of the things I've had to endure after that. What's interesting, though, about being broken during that time, it is not that I say God wanted to break me, my family, for the sake of hurting me. But if I take a pot and let's say, put sugar in it, and let's say if I spray paint that pot green, so you can't see what's on the inside of it. You just see a green pot. And that pot sits there for a long time, and you have no idea that there is something really sweet and good on the inside of it. And you decide to come over and take that pot and you slam it down and you break it. And somebody may go, you lunatic, why did you break that pot? Well, it is because through that process of being broken, that the contents on the inside come out. If it had not been broken, what was on the inside would have never came out. And I think a lot of times, a lot of us have great things on the inside of us. And it's a couple of things that happen. We procrastinate and we sit around, or we're waiting for somebody else to come pull this stuff out of us. Mm-hmm. Or we're scared, or we're insecure, or we feel like we don't have the resources, or we're not smart enough, or we're not qualified. So that green pot just sits on the counter with all those great contents on the inside, and it never budges until God or a circumstance or life itself comes and knocks that pot on the ground, and it breaks, and those pieces shatter, and all of the good stuff comes out. Then sometimes with brokenness, there are some things in us, and I believe this happened to me that year, that didn't need to be there. There were some things about me that needed to change, some thoughts that needed to change, some behaviors that needed to change. And if it had not been for that brokenness and that pain, which revealed those things to me, like, hey, maybe I should be thinking about this, or I can't treat this person like this, or I can't talk to my kids like this, or I shouldn't allow this to get me this angry, or I shouldn't allow this to even depress me or bring forth anxiety in my life, because technically I can control that stuff. Then that brokenness revealed that to me. And so now I have more discipline, more self-control, more faith, which has given me the wherewithal to handle things. I remember when was this? This was in October of last year, Halloween, matter of fact. Someone broke into our place. And I remember walking in and I looked around after it dawned on me that it happened. And honestly, to my surprise, I thought I was going to flip out and just go crazy. And I remember standing there, seriously. And I looked around and I was like, well, something good is about to happen. Now, I said a few bad words after that. Like, after some of the Christ likeness went away, then the old Aundre from the hood kind of came. But the first response though was like, okay, and then the anger and everything said it. Like I said, I'm just being very straightforward. I'm not perfect by any means, but I handled that situation way better than I thought I would.
Do you think that's because you have this renowned appreciation for what's really important?
Yeah, I do. And I think, and to me now I struggled a few days after that. Like it was rough. After I really started contemplating on the fact that someone was stepping and violating my family like that. I had some days where I cried. I had some days where I was enraged, wanted to go find them, and whoever it was. But that was another story or another incident where I was broken. You know what? And so I'm like, man, why does this keep happening?
Yeah.
But I'm like, now I have a greater appreciation for brokenness because that lets me know that something good is going to come out of it, or God is preparing me for something. Even if it's just getting on a Zoom call and sharing a story. If my brokenness had nothing to do with me and it was all about this moment, I'm okay with that because I can't authentically talk about brokenness if I have not been broken myself. The message is not going to be as powerful or effective if I had not been broken myself. So I really want to encourage people to not beat themselves up so much when they go through a season of brokenness and try. And it's hard to do, but try your best to be as optimistic as you can, to know that this is going to make me stronger. This is going to make me better. I'm going to come out of this. I may not come out of it when I want to. It may last longer than I want it to last, but I'm going to come out of it. And there's going to be some good stuff that's going to come out of me. And there's going to be some bad things that now I can get rid of that was probably toxic to me, whether that's a job or relationships or certain behaviors. Like we all deal with that stuff, right? So during that brokenness, it's like, I feel like God is almost saying, like, I'm going to break you because you're so much better than that. And there's so much more for you to do. And some of those things are really just holding you back. So since you don't want to break it, I will. And then sometimes I believe that we can make the decision to break things on our own, especially when it comes down to like practical things like certain relationships and things like that. Like if you know that's not good for you, break away from it. You know what I mean? If you know that activity or that thing or that habit or that addiction or whatever it is, if you know that that's not good for you, break away from it. You know what I mean? So I'll kind of stop with this thought. There's beauty to brokenness. Something beautiful can come out of being broken. It really can. But and it's not going to always be easy to deal with it. And something else can happen to me tomorrow and I may struggle with it. You know what I mean? But I do have this newfound perspective that when I find myself being broken, it's like, okay, if I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, I'm like, okay, I got to respond to this the right way. And if I respond to it the right way, then yes, beauty will most definitely come out of the brokenness. So.
Hey everyone. Thank you so, so much for tuning in and for helping me to connect with other moms of addicts or loved ones who are struggling with addiction in their lives. If you have questions for me, comments, suggestions on future show content, or perhaps there's a specific topic that you would like to hear from an expert in the field, I would love to hear from you. I am also interested in sharing your voice. So if you have messages of hope or personal stories that you think would resonate with our listeners, please send me an email. You can type me out a message, or you can include an attachment to an audio clip with your voice. You can send that to shar@beyondhoperadio.com. And with that, thank you again, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Hope. For show notes and more, head on over to beyondhoperadio.com.
A huge thank you to recoveryinnovators.com and James Healy. Thank you so much for putting up with me and for helping me to produce and launch the show. I couldn't have done it without you. You're so awesome. And to anybody else who has been considering working with James, highly recommend him. Please go over to his website and check it out, recoveryinnovators.com.